The throne room fell silent as King Alaric raised his hand, pale flames dancing across his fingertips. Audrey's knees pressed against the cold marble floor, her wrists bound behind her back with enchanted rope that burned against her skin. Every vampire in the great hall stared at her with expressions ranging from disgust to curiosity, their crimson eyes gleaming in the torchlight. She had been dragged here in the middle of the night, torn from the servants' quarters where she'd been sleeping, and thrown before the vampire king himself. "You dare to defile my bloodline?" King Alaric's voice echoed through the chamber, each word dripping with venom. "A human servant, spreading her legs for the crown prince of our kingdom?" Audrey's throat tightened. Her heart hammered against her ribcage so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She could feel Maverick's presence somewhere behind the crowd of nobles, could sense his anguish like a blade pressed to her throat. But she didn't dare look for him. One glance might give away everything they'd worked so hard to hide. "Father, this is madness!" Maverick's voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. "You have no proof of—" "Silence!" The king's roar shook the chandeliers overhead. "Your own guard reported seeing you enter her chamber 3 nights ago. Do you deny it?" The crowd of assembled vampires murmured amongst themselves, a sound like rustling leaves before a storm. Lady Morgana, the king's chief advisor, stepped forward with a cruel smile twisting her perfect features. She had always hated Audrey, had always found excuses to make her life in the castle miserable. Now she looked like a cat who'd finally cornered a mouse. "The evidence is damning, Your Majesty," Morgana said, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous. "The prince has been bewitched by this creature. It's the only explanation for why our future king would lower himself to touch human flesh." Audrey's stomach churned with rage and fear in equal measure. She wanted to scream that it wasn't like that what she and Maverick shared was real, that he had pursued her first, seen something in her that no one else had bothered to look for. But her voice felt trapped in her chest, suffocated by terror. "She has done nothing wrong!" Maverick pushed through the crowd, his dark hair disheveled, his shirt half-buttoned as if he'd dressed in haste. His silver eyes found hers for just a moment, and in them she saw everything: love, fear, determination. "Father, please, if you must punish someone, punish me! She is innocent!" King Alaric descended the 7 steps from his obsidian throne, each footfall deliberate and terrifying. He was ancient, one of the first vampires to walk the earth, and his power radiated from him like heat from a forge. The holy flames in his palm grew brighter, more intense. Audrey had heard stories about those flames, fire blessed by the old gods, deadly to vampires and humans alike, used only for the most severe executions. "Innocent," the king laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "No human is innocent, boy. They are cattle, food, playthings at best. And when one of them gets ideas above her station, when she thinks she can trap a prince with her body—" He stopped directly in front of Audrey, looking down at her as if she were an insect. She must be reminded of her place. Audrey forced herself to meet his gaze. Her whole body trembled, but she refused to look away. She had grown up an orphan in the human territories, scrounging for scraps, fighting for every breath. She had survived things that would have broken most people. She would not cower now, even if these were her last moments. "I love him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying through the silent hall. "Whatever you do to me, that won't change." The king's eyes flashed with something dark and dangerous. "Then let me show you what your love has earned." He thrust his hand forward, and the holy flames shot toward her like a spear. Audrey heard Maverick scream of horror, heard him shouting her name, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. The white-hot fire struck her chest, and she braced for the agony, for the burning, for death. But it didn't come. Instead, the flames spread across her skin like water, like liquid light, and she felt warmth. Not pain, not burning, but a comfortable heat that sank into her bones and made something deep inside her chest stir and wake. The flames didn't hurt. They felt like coming home. The entire throne room gasped in unison. King Alaric stumbled backward, his face contorting with shock. Lady Morgana's smug expression melted into open-mouthed disbelief. And Maverick, Audrey could finally look at him now, stood frozen with his hands still outstretched as if he'd been trying to reach her, his eyes wide with wonder and confusion. The holy flames continued to dance across Audrey's skin, swirling around her arms, her throat, her face. The enchanted ropes binding her wrists suddenly crumbled to ash, and she rose to her feet without meaning to, pulled upward by some force she didn't understand. The fire felt alive, sentient, as if it recognized her, as if it had been waiting for her. "Impossible," the king breathed. "No creature can absorb the holy flames, no vampire, no human, nothing." But he stopped mid-sentence because the flames were changing. They darkened from pure white to silver blue, then to a deep crimson that matched the color of vampire eyes. Audrey held up her hands and watched the fire spiral around her fingers, obedient to her will, though she had no idea how she was controlling it. "Audrey." Maverick started toward her, but his father threw out an arm to block him.
"Stay back! We don't know what she is!"
Lady Morgana recovered her composure first, her mind clearly racing through possibilities. "Your Majesty, the old texts speak of a bloodline that was thought extinct, the Phoenix Blessed. They were said to—"
"I know what they were said to do,"
King Alaric snapped. His shock was rapidly transforming into something else. Not fear exactly, but calculation. Hunger. They were human women blessed by the ancient flame, capable of bearing children with abilities no other bloodline could produce. They were hunted to extinction 5 centuries ago because the vampire covens feared what those children might become. Audrey's mind reeled. She had never known her parents, had been left as an infant at an orphanage with nothing but a silver pendant around her neck. The matron who ran the place had told her she was ordinary, unremarkable, destined for a life of servitude. And Audrey had believed it, had worn her invisibility like armor. Even when Maverick had noticed her 6 months ago, had started finding excuses to visit the kitchens where she worked, had eventually pulled her into a storage room and kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Even then, she had thought herself lucky, not special. But this was something else entirely. The flames finally dimmed and faded, sinking back into her skin as if her body were drinking them in. She felt different now, stronger, more aware. She could sense the vampires in the room, could feel their power like distinct signatures, some weak and flickering, others blazing bright. Maverick's felt like midnight and starlight, cool and beautiful. His father's felt like an ancient glacier, cold and crushing. "Father." Maverick's voice had changed, become more controlled, more dangerous. "You will not harm her." "You dare command me, boy?" "I dare everything for her." Maverick moved to stand between Audrey and the king, his posture protective, his hands clenched at his sides. "She is Phoenix blessed. Do you understand what that means? She's not just some human servant. She's a weapon," the king interrupted, his eyes glittering with dark ambition. "A tool that could strengthen our bloodline beyond measure. Could create an army of vampire hybrids with abilities we've only dreamed of." He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Audrey had ever seen. "She's valuable, too valuable to waste on a lovesick prince." The words hit Audrey like a physical blow. She understood now with sickening clarity. She had gone from being worthless to being priceless in the span of minutes. But she still wasn't seen as a person. She was still just a thing to be used. "You will not touch her." Maverick's voice dropped to a growl that Audrey had never heard from him before. "I will not allow it." "You will not allow?" King Alaric laughed, but there was an edge of genuine anger creeping into his tone. "You forget yourself. I am the king. She is nothing. And if I decide that she will be auctioned to the highest bidder among our noble houses, if I decide she will be bred like the valuable livestock she is." Audrey didn't remember moving. One moment she was standing frozen in shock, and the next she was directly in front of the king, her hand wrapped around his throat, crimson flames erupting from her palm. The fire didn't burn her, but from the way Alaric's eyes widened, from the way his skin began to sizzle and crack beneath her fingers, it was burning him. "I am not livestock," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos raging inside her. "I am not a weapon. I am not a thing for you to trade or sell or use. I am Audrey, and I will burn anyone who tries to make me less than human." The throne room erupted into pandemonium. Vampires scattered, shouting in alarm. Lady Morgana shrieked orders at the guards, but the guards didn't move. They stood frozen, unsure whether to attack the girl who held their king by the throat or to wait for orders from the prince. Maverick appeared at her side, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "Audrey, let him go." "He was going to sell me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Like I'm an object. Like I'm nothing." "I know, but if you kill him, they'll execute you. We'll find another way." She wanted to argue, wanted to let the flames consume the king and end this nightmare. But she could feel Maverick's presence beside her like an anchor, steady and sure. She trusted him. Even now, even when her whole world had been turned inside out, she trusted him. Audrey released the king and stepped back. Alaric collapsed to his knees, gasping, his hand clutching his throat where angry red burns were already starting to heal with supernatural speed. He looked up at her with an expression of pure rage mixed with something that might have been respect. "Guards!" he rasped. "Seize her!" But before anyone could move, Maverick drew his sword, a blade forged from ancient silver inscribed with runes that glowed in the darkness. He pointed it at his own father. "No." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Every vampire in the hall froze. To draw a weapon on the king was treason. To draw a weapon on your own father was unforgivable. But Maverick didn't lower the blade. "She is under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me." King Alaric rose slowly to his feet, his hand still pressed to his throat. For a long moment, father and son stared at each other, and Audrey could feel the weight of centuries of history between them, of battles fought and won, of power struggles and political games she couldn't begin to understand. Finally, the king smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Very well. If you care for her so deeply, prove it. The old laws still stand, do they not, Morgana? Lady Morgana stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral now. They do, Your Majesty. Then I invoke the trial of bloodbinding. If the prince truly believes this human is worthy of our bloodline, if he truly thinks she deserves to stand at his side, let him bind himself to her before the court. Let him make her his eternal mate, knowing that if she proves false, if she betrays him, both of them will be executed together. Audrey's breath caught in her throat. She knew about blood bindings. Everyone in the castle did. It was the most sacred and most dangerous ritual in vampire culture. When two beings bound themselves with blood, they became connected at the deepest level, able to sense each other's emotions, share each other's power, even share each other's pain. If one died, the other would follow within days, unable to survive the severing of the bond. It was meant for true mates, for pairs who would face eternity together. It was permanent, unbreakable, and absolute. Maverick turned to look at her, his silver eyes searching her face. Audrey? She understood what he was asking. This wasn't just about love anymore. This was about survival, about politics, about binding their fates together so completely that his father couldn't separate them without losing his heir. But it was also real. The feelings between them were real. The nights they'd spent in stolen moments, whispering dreams to each other in the darkness, those had been real too. Yes, she said simply. I choose you. The king's smile widened, cruel and triumphant. How touching. But there's one small addition to the trial. If she survives the binding, if her human body can withstand the transformation of becoming an eternal mate, then I will acknowledge her place at your side. But, he paused for effect, she must prove herself worthy. 7 trials, each designed to test her strength, her loyalty, and her ability to wield the phoenix flame. Fail even one, and the binding will be broken. You will both be exiled from this kingdom, stripped of titles and protection. That's not how the ritual works! You're twisting the old laws! I am the king, and I decide how the laws apply. Alaric's voice cracked like a whip. Accept my terms, or watch me auction your precious human to the highest bidder tonight. Those are your choices. Audrey saw Maverick's jaw clench, saw the muscles in his shoulders tighten with barely contained rage. But when he spoke again, his voice was ice-cold and controlled. We accept. The next hour passed in a blur. Audrey was taken to a preparation chamber where servants, vampire women who looked at her with a mixture of pity and fascination, dressed her in ceremonial robes made of silver silk. They painted symbols on her arms and throat, ancient markings that were supposed to protect her during the binding ritual. One of them, a younger vampire named Isla, who had always been kind to Audrey in the kitchens, squeezed her hand. The binding will hurt, Isla whispered. His blood entering your system, your blood entering his. It's like being unmade and remade at the same time. But if you survive it, you'll be stronger than any of us could imagine. Phoenix blessed and vampire bound? The old texts say that combination created the most powerful beings to ever walk the earth. Why were they hunted? Audrey asked, her voice hollow. Why did the vampires kill them all? Isla's expression darkened. Fear. The children born from phoenix-blessed and vampire unions could walk in daylight, could wield holy fire, could command both life and death. The vampire kings feared they would be overthrown, that a new species would replace them. So they destroyed every phoenix-blessed woman they could find, made sure the bloodline died out. But I survived. You did, and that terrifies them. Isla finished the last symbol on Audrey's collarbone. Use that fear. Use it to survive. When they led her back to the throne room, it had been transformed. The floor was covered in a massive circular design drawn in salt and silver, ancient runes glowing with pale blue light. Candles burned at 7 points around the circle, their flames dancing without wind. And in the center stood Maverick, his shirt removed, his chest bare and marked with the same symbols that now decorated Audrey's skin. He looked beautiful and terrible. Every inch the vampire prince. But when his eyes found hers across the room, the expression in them was pure vulnerability. "Are you ready?" he asked as she stepped into the circle beside him. "No," she admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That's my brave girl." King Alaric stood at the edge of the circle, a ceremonial dagger in his hand. The blade was black obsidian, carved with runes that seemed to writhe and shift in the candlelight. Lady Morgana stood beside him, holding an ancient book, ready to speak the words of binding. "By the old laws and the ancient covenants," Alaric began, his voice carrying through the hall, "I call forth the blood binding. Let these two souls be joined, their fates intertwined, their power shared. Let no force separate them, save death itself." He handed the dagger to Maverick, who took it with steady hands. Maverick turned to face Audrey fully, his expression serious now, weighted with the gravity of what they were about to do. "This will hurt you," he said quietly, meant only for her. "I'm sorry." "I can take it," she replied, lifting her chin. "I've survived worse." "I know you have. That's why I fell in love with you." He pressed the blade to his palm and drew it across in one smooth motion. Dark blood welled up, and he held his hand over hers. "I offer my blood, my power, my eternal life." Audrey took the dagger from him with trembling fingers. She pressed it to her own palm, felt the sharp bite of pain, and sliced quickly before she could second-guess herself. Her blood was brighter than his, more red than black, and when she pressed her palm to his, the difference was stark. "I offer my blood, my fire, my humanity," she said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her, as if she'd always known them. The moment their blood mingled, the world exploded into sensation. Audrey felt Maverick's power slam into her like a tidal wave, ancient, vast, cold, and beautiful and overwhelming. She felt his emotions too, the love he'd been holding back, the fear that he would lose her, the fierce protectiveness that had driven him to defy his father. She felt his memories flickering past, the first time he'd seen her in the kitchens, smiling despite her exhaustion. The night he'd kissed her and felt his dead heart stutter in his chest. The moment, tonight, when he'd thought his father's flames would kill her. And he felt her too. She knew he did because she could sense his wonder, his awe as he experienced her strength, the resilience she'd forged from years of survival, the flame that had always burned inside her even before she knew what it was. He felt her love for him, wild and desperate and real, and her terror that she would fail the trials, that she would cost him everything. The pain came next. Her blood began to burn in her veins, not with holy fire, but with something darker, colder. Vampire venom mixing with her phoenix nature. She gasped and tried to pull away, but Maverick's hand tightened around hers. "Don't let go. If you break the connection now." She understood. Breaking the binding mid-ritual would kill them both. So she held on, even as her vision went white with agony, even as she felt her bones shifting, changing, becoming something other than human. She heard herself screaming, but couldn't stop. Couldn't do anything but endure as her body was unmade and remade. As vampire magic and phoenix fire warred inside her and finally, impossibly, merged. When it finally ended, she collapsed to her knees, gasping. Maverick caught her before she could fall completely, his arms wrapping around her, and she realized she could feel his heartbeat now. Not the steady thump of a living heart, but the slow, deep pulse of an undead one. And he could feel hers, racing and alive, a frantic drum that echoed in both their chests. "You did it," he breathed against her hair. "You survived." Audrey looked up at him and saw him differently now. She could see the threads of power that made up his essence, could see the way the magic flowed through him. And when she looked down at her own hands, she saw the same threads in herself, silver and red intertwined, vampire and phoenix woven together into something entirely new. King Alaric's voice shattered the moment. "The binding is complete. Now comes the first trial." Audrey forced herself to stand, though her legs felt like water. Maverick stayed close, his hand on her back, but she knew he couldn't help her with this. The trials were hers to face, alone. The king gestured, and 6 vampires stepped forward from the crowd. They were large, muscular, clearly warriors from the royal guard. Their eyes gleamed with anticipation. "The first trial. Combat. You claim to be worthy of standing beside a prince, but you're still a human at your core. Prove you have the strength to defend yourself and your mate. Survive against 6 of my best guards for 10 minutes, and you pass." "This is madness," Maverick snarled. "She just completed the binding. Her body is still adjusting." "Which is why I'm giving her a full 10 minutes instead of 5. My generosity knows no bounds." The guards formed a circle around Audrey. She could feel Maverick's fury through their bond, could sense his desperate desire to intervene, but she also felt his forced stillness. If he interfered, they would both fail automatically. This was her fight. The first guard attacked without warning, moving with supernatural speed. His fist aimed for her face, and Audrey barely managed to duck, stumbling sideways. She had no training, no experience with combat. She was a kitchen servant who'd spent her life peeling potatoes and scrubbing floors. How was she supposed to fight vampire warriors? But as the second guard came at her from behind, something inside her ignited. The phoenix flame roared to life, instinctive and fierce, and fire erupted from her hands. The guard shrieked and stumbled back, his sleeve burning. Audrey didn't think, just acted, spinning and sending waves of crimson fire toward the attackers. They scattered, clearly not expecting the intensity of the flames. "She's using her power," Lady Morgana cried out. "That's cheating!" "I said she had to survive. I didn't say how." King Alaric leaned forward on his throne, watching with keen interest. "Continue." The guards adapted quickly. They began moving in coordinated patterns, forcing Audrey to divide her attention. One would faint while another struck from her blind spot. She took hits. A fist to her ribs that cracked something inside her. A kick to her leg that sent her sprawling. Pain exploded through her body, and she felt Maverick flinch through their bond, felt him experiencing every blow she took. "Get up!" His voice cut through her haze of pain. "You're stronger than this. Use our bond. Feel my power." She reached for him through the connection they now shared and felt his strength flood into her. His vampire speed, his enhanced reflexes, his centuries of battle experience. It flowed through the bond like a river, and suddenly, she could move faster, think clearer. When the next guard attacked, she was ready. She dodged, used his momentum against him, sent him crashing into another guard with a well-placed burst of flame. The fight became a dance. Duck, spin, strike with fire. Use the guard's strength against them. Stay moving. Never let them corner her. Her phoenix flames grew hotter, more controlled, responding to her will with increasing precision. She could feel her body adapting, the vampire magic from the binding enhancing her abilities in ways she was only beginning to understand. One guard managed to grab her arm, his grip crushing. She felt bones grinding together and screamed, but instead of pulling away, she channeled fire directly through the point of contact. The guard howled and released her, his hand badly burned. 3 down, 3 to go. The remaining guards were warier now, circling her like wolves. She could feel their power, could sense the bloodlust rising in them. They wanted to hurt her, to punish her for the audacity of binding herself to their prince. But she wanted to survive more than they wanted to destroy her. When they rushed her simultaneously from 3 sides, she did something instinctive and impossible. She released all her fire at once, creating a dome of crimson flame around herself. The guards bounced off it like they'd hit a wall, and when the flames dispersed, they were sprawled on the floor, groaning. Silence fell over the throne room. Audrey stood in the center of the salt circle, breathing hard, her clothes singed and torn, blood dripping from a cut above her eye. But she was standing. 10 minutes had passed, and she was still standing. She passes. King Alaric's voice was flat, but Audrey could hear the frustration beneath it. He hadn't expected her to survive. Maverick was beside her in an instant, his hands gentle as he checked her injuries. "Are you okay? Let me see." "I'm fine," she managed, though her whole body ached. "What's the next trial?" "You want to continue now?" "Audrey, you need to rest." "The trials must be completed within 3 days," King Alaric said, standing from his throne. "Take her to the guest chambers. She'll have until tomorrow evening to recover. Then comes the second trial." As Maverick helped her from the throne room, Audrey felt the eyes of every vampire following her. Some looked impressed. Others looked terrified. Lady Morgana looked murderous, her perfect face twisted with rage at seeing Audrey succeed. But Audrey didn't care about any of them. She had survived the first trial. She had proven she could fight, and with Maverick's strength flowing through their bond, his presence constant and steadying in her mind, she felt something she'd never felt before in her life. She felt like she might actually win. The guest chambers were luxurious beyond anything Audrey had ever experienced. The bed was massive, draped in silk and velvet, and a fire roared in the marble fireplace despite the summer heat. Maverick dismissed the servants and locked the door behind them, then turned to face her with an expression of pure anguish. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful, should have hidden our relationship better. Stop." Audrey crossed to him and took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "This isn't your fault. Your father would have found a reason to destroy me eventually. At least this way, I have a chance to fight back. You were almost killed tonight. I felt every blow they landed on you, felt your pain. And I felt your strength helping me stand back up." She pressed her forehead to his. "We're bonded now, Maverick. Really bonded." I can feel you in my head, in my heart. I'm not alone anymore." He wrapped his arms around her, careful of her injuries, and held her like she was something precious. "I've never felt anything like this bond. It's overwhelming. Feeling your emotions, your thoughts. I know." She could sense his love for her, vast and deep and utterly genuine. It filled all the empty spaces inside her that years of being an orphan, of being alone, had carved out. "I feel you too." They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other, drawing strength from their connection. Finally, Maverick pulled back and guided her to sit on the edge of the bed. He knelt before her and began carefully removing her torn ceremonial robes, checking each injury with gentle touches. 3 broken ribs. Your left leg is badly bruised. This cut needs to be cleaned. His fingers traced the wound above her eye. "But you're already healing, faster than a human should. The bond is changing you." "What does that mean?" "It means you're becoming something new. Not vampire, not human, not purely phoenix blessed. Something the world hasn't seen in centuries." He met her eyes. "My father will either try to control you or try to kill you once the trials are over. He's only allowing this because he's curious to see what you become." "Then I'll become something he can't control," Audrey said fiercely. "I'll become strong enough that he has no choice but to accept me." "There's my fierce girl." Maverick smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I need to tell you something. The 6 remaining trials, I know what they are. My father used them once before, centuries ago, to test a vampire who wanted to marry into the royal bloodline." "What happened to that vampire?" "She died in the 4th trial." Audrey's stomach sank. "What are the trials?" Maverick stood and began pacing, his movements agitated. "Combat was first. Next is endurance. He'll try to break your spirit, probably through isolation or sensory deprivation. Third is loyalty. He'll test whether you'll betray me to save yourself. Fourth is mastery of power. You'll have to demonstrate complete control of your phoenix flames. Fifth is wisdom, some kind of puzzle or political challenge. Sixth is mercy. He'll put someone at your mercy and see if you'll show compassion or cruelty." He paused. "And seventh?" "Seventh is always a secret. The king chooses it in the moment, designed specifically to exploit whatever weakness he's discovered in the person being tested." "So I have to survive 6 impossible trials and then 1 mystery trial that's specifically designed to destroy me." Audrey laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "Your father really doesn't want me around." "My father is a fool. He doesn't see what I see." Maverick came back to her and cupped her face in his hands. "You're not just surviving, Audrey. You're thriving. Every trial will make you stronger. By the time you face the 7th trial, you'll be powerful enough to burn this entire kingdom to ash if you choose." "I don't want to burn anything," she whispered. "I just want to be with you." "You will be. I swear it on my eternal life. We'll survive this together." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and Audrey felt their bond flare bright with shared emotion. She tasted his fear and his hope, his love and his determination, and she poured all her own feelings back into him through the connection. They were one now, bound by blood and magic and choice. When they finally broke apart, Audrey felt steadier, more grounded, ready for whatever came next. The next evening, she was summoned back to the throne room for the 2nd trial. This time, instead of guards waiting for her, there was only a single door, black iron, covered in runes that seemed to writhe and shift like living things. "The second trial, endurance." King Alaric gestured to the door. "Behind that door is a chamber where time moves differently. You will experience 7 days in isolation, with no food, no water, no contact with anyone, including your bonded mate. Our connection will be severed temporarily by the runes. If you maintain your sanity and emerge after 7 days, you pass." Audrey felt her breath catch. 7 days alone? Cut off from Maverick? From the bond that had become her anchor? The thought terrified her more than the combat had. "You can't sever a blood bond!" Maverick stepped forward, his face pale with fury. "It could kill them both. The bond won't be broken, merely muted. She'll survive." The king's smile was cruel. "Probably." Audrey looked at Maverick and saw her own fear reflected in his eyes. Through their bond, she felt his desperate urge to stop this, to grab her and run, to damn the consequences. But they both knew that running would mean spending eternity looking over their shoulders, always hunted, always hiding. "I can do this," she said, more to convince herself than him. "Audrey, I can do this," she repeated firmly. She walked to the black door and placed her hand on its surface. The metal was ice cold beneath her palm. She looked back at Maverick one last time. "I'll see you in 7 days. I love you." "I love you too." She opened the door and stepped through. The moment the door closed behind her, Audrey felt the bond go silent. It was like having a limb amputated. The sudden absence of Maverick's presence in her mind was physically painful. She gasped and stumbled, pressing her hand to her chest as if she could somehow reach through her ribs and find him again. But he was gone. She was alone. The chamber was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with smooth stone walls and no windows. There was no furniture, no water, nothing but her and the silence. Magical torches burned in the corners, providing dim light but no heat. She could already feel time behaving strangely. Each breath seemed to take an eternity, yet when she blinked, hours seemed to pass. The first day was manageable. She sat in the center of the room and practiced controlling her phoenix flames, summoning them and dismissing them, creating shapes and patterns to keep her mind occupied. She thought about Maverick, about the life they would build together once she passed all the trials. By the second day, the hunger started. Not just physical hunger, though that was present too, but a deeper hunger for connection, for touch, for Maverick's presence in her mind. She found herself talking out loud just to hear a voice, even if it was only her own. "You can do this," she told herself. "You're strong. You survived being an orphan. You survived working in a castle full of creatures who saw you as food. You can survive 7 days alone." But by the third day, the isolation was breaking her. She caught herself having conversations with people who weren't there, seeing Maverick in the shadows, only to realize she was hallucinating. The hunger had become a constant ache, and without water, her throat was dry as sand. Her phoenix fire flickered weakly now, as if even it was exhausted. On the 4th day, she started to hear voices. They whispered from the walls, cruel and mocking. "He doesn't really love you. He'll abandon you once you're no longer interesting. You're nothing, an orphan, a servant. You don't deserve a prince. You're going to fail. You're going to die in here, alone and forgotten." Audrey pressed her hands over her ears, but the voices didn't stop. They came from inside her own head, demons of self-doubt that had always lived there, now unleashed by the isolation. She curled into a ball on the cold stone floor and let herself cry for the first time since entering the chamber. But as she cried, something shifted. The tears felt cleansing, like rain after a drought. And beneath the despair, she found anger. She was tired of being told she was nothing, tired of people trying to break her spirit. The king thought 7 days of isolation would shatter her. He had no idea what she'd already survived. On the 5th day, she stood up. Her body was weak, dehydrated, and starving, but her spirit was steel. She began practicing combat moves, remembering the patterns from the first trial, keeping her body moving even though it hurt. She couldn't let herself grow too weak to fight. On the 6th day, she discovered something remarkable. Without Maverick's presence to anchor to, she found herself reaching deeper into her own power. The phoenix flame responded stronger than ever, as if it had been waiting for her to rely solely on herself. She could feel it in her veins, in her bones, a fire that would never be extinguished because it was part of who she was. Not just part of some ancient bloodline, but part of her, Audrey, the orphan girl who had refused to break no matter what the world threw at her. On the 7th day, the door opened. Audrey stumbled out into the throne room, blinking in the brighter light. Maverick was there instantly, catching her before she could fall, his hands gentle as he supported her weight. 7 days, he breathed. You did it. You survived. Through their bond, now reconnected, she felt his relief crash into her like a wave. He had experienced every moment of the 7 days outside, unable to feel her, terrified she was dying or going mad in that chamber. His agony had been almost as bad as hers. King Alaric stood from his throne, his expression unreadable. She passes. Give her water and food. Let her recover for 1 day. Tomorrow, the 3rd trial begins. As servants rushed forward with water and bread, as Maverick held her and whispered comfort into her hair, Audrey looked up at the king and saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Respect. Grudging and reluctant, but real. She had survived 2 trials, 5 more to go, and with each one she was becoming more than she had been. Not just stronger in power, but stronger in spirit, in will, in the unshakable knowledge that she was worth fighting for. The 3rd trial came too soon. Audrey had barely recovered from the isolation chamber, still weak and unsteady when she was once again summoned to the throne room. This time, Lady Morgana was waiting with a poisonous smile. The 3rd trial tests loyalty, Morgana announced. We must know that your bond to the prince is genuine, not merely a ploy for power. 2 guards dragged a prisoner forward, a young human woman, maybe 20 years old, dressed in servant's clothes. She was sobbing, her face bruised and bloody. Audrey recognized her vaguely from the kitchens. This girl was caught stealing from the royal treasury, Morgana continued. The punishment is death. However, she gestured elegantly to Audrey, if you execute her yourself, using your phoenix flames, we'll consider it proof that you're willing to do what's necessary to protect this kingdom. You'll pass the trial. Her smile widened. But if you refuse, if you let your human compassion cloud your judgment, you fail. And failure means exile for both you and the prince. Audrey stared at the crying girl. Her mind raced. This was the loyalty trial Maverick had warned her about, a test of whether she would betray her own values to save herself. Don't do it. Maverick's voice was low, meant only for her. We'll find another way. We'll accept exile if we must, but don't let them force you to become a murderer." But Audrey barely heard him. She was looking at the girl, really looking. And she saw things that didn't add up. The bruises were fresh but superficial. The tears seemed performed. And there was something in the girl's eyes, a calculation that didn't match her crying. This wasn't a real prisoner. This was a plant, another layer to the test. Audrey stepped forward, summoning her phoenix flames. They danced across her palms, crimson and deadly. The girl's sobbing intensified, but Audrey caught the tiniest flicker of satisfaction in Morgana's eyes. "Tell me," Audrey said quietly. "What did you steal?" The girl hiccuped, confused by the question. I took a ruby necklace from the Queen's chamber." "The Queen has been dead for 2 centuries," Audrey interrupted. "There is no Queen's chamber." She turned to face King Alaric. "This is a trick. You never intended for me to kill her. You wanted to see if I would murder an innocent person just to pass your test." The king's expression flickered, surprise, then something that might have been approval. He glanced at Morgana, who looked furious at having her scheme exposed. "Clever," Alaric said. "You're right. The girl is one of Morgana's servants, playing a role. The true test was whether you would be blinded by desperation or whether you would think." He stood from his throne. "You pass. Loyalty is not just about who you'll kill for. It's about who you'll refuse to kill." Audrey let her flames die out. Her hands were shaking with relief and residual fear, but she kept her voice steady. "What's the 4th trial?" "Tomorrow. For now, rest." But that night, as Audrey lay in Maverick's arms, neither of them could rest. They could both feel it through their bond. The trials were getting harder, more dangerous. The king was probing for weaknesses, trying to find the one thing that would break her. "The 4th trial will be about controlling your power," Maverick murmured in the darkness. "He'll push you to your limit, try to make you lose control. If you hurt someone accidentally, if your flames go wild—" "They won't," Audrey said with more confidence than she felt. "I won't let them." The 4th trial was held in the training courtyard. Targets had been set up at various distances, each one marked with complex symbols. King Alaric explained the rules with barely concealed anticipation. "You must hit each target with your phoenix flames, but each target requires a different level of power. Too much, and you'll destroy it. Too little, and you'll fail to activate the rune. Perfect control is required." He paused. "And if you miss even once, if a stray flame touches anything other than the targets, you fail immediately." Audrey studied the course. 20 targets, each one progressively more difficult. Some were tiny, barely the size of her fist. Others were moving, and all of them required precise, measured power. She took a deep breath and began. The first few targets were manageable. She sent small, controlled bursts of flame, striking each one dead center. The runes glowed as she hit them correctly. But as she progressed, the difficulty increased. One target split into 3, forcing her to divide her attention. Another reflected her flame back at her, requiring her to absorb it before it hit the ground. By the 15th target, sweat poured down her face. Her phoenix fire was getting harder to control, wanting to burst free with all its power. She could feel the ancient magic inside her straining against her will, like a wild horse refusing to be tamed. The 16th target began spinning, faster and faster. Audrey waited for the right moment, released her flame, and missed by inches. The fire shot past the target, heading straight for a pillar covered in ancient tapestries. Without thinking, she pulled the flame back, drawing it toward herself like reeling in a fish. The fire responded, curving through the air, following her will. She guided it in a circle and sent it back at the target, striking true this time. The courtyard erupted in gasps of amazement. Even King Alaric sat forward, his eyes wide. "That's impossible," he breathed. "No Phoenix Blessed has ever been able to recall flames once released." Audrey didn't respond. She was too focused on the remaining targets. 4 more. She could do this. The 17th target required her to split one flame into multiple streams, hitting 3 separate runes simultaneously. The 18th demanded she create a flame that would burn for exactly 5 seconds before extinguishing itself. The 19th required absolute precision, threading her fire through a series of small hoops. And then came the 20th. The final target wasn't a symbol on wood or stone. It was a living vampire, one of the guards from the first trial, the one whose hand she'd burned. He stood perfectly still, and balanced on top of his head was a glass sphere containing a small glowing rune. "You must strike the sphere without harming the guard," King Alaric said. "Show me your control is so perfect that you can burn glass, but not flesh." Audrey felt her heart sink. This was cruel beyond measure. One mistake and she would kill an innocent vampire. But if she refused, she failed the trial. She looked at the guard. He stared straight ahead, stoic, but she could see fear in his eyes. He didn't want to die any more than she wanted to kill him. "You can do this," Maverick's voice came from beside her. "I felt your power through our bond. You have control you don't even know about yet. Trust yourself." Audrey raised her hand. She let the phoenix fire build, but instead of releasing it in a burst, she shaped it. She thinned it to a needle, precise and focused, containing all her power in the smallest possible point. She could see the flame in her mind's eye, see exactly where it needed to go. She released it. The thread of fire shot across the courtyard, so thin it was barely visible, and struck the glass sphere. The glass shattered instantly, the rune inside flaring bright before extinguishing. Not a single spark touched the guard's skin. The vampire stood frozen for a moment, then slowly raised his hand to touch his head, checking for burns. Finding none, his face broke into an expression of pure relief. The courtyard exploded into applause. Even some of the nobles who had been hostile to Audrey were clapping, clearly impressed despite themselves. King Alaric rose slowly from his throne. For a long moment, he simply stared at Audrey. Then, finally, he spoke. "You pass. 4 trials complete. 3 remain." That night, Audrey dreamed of fire. She stood in a burning city, flames rising all around her. But she wasn't afraid. She could feel every flame, could control them all simultaneously, could make them dance or die at her will. In the dream, she wasn't human or vampire or phoenix blessed. She was something entirely new, something powerful enough to reshape the world. She woke to find Maverick watching her, his expression troubled. "Your eyes were glowing," he said quietly. "Even in sleep, your power was active. The bond is changing you faster than I expected." "Is that bad?" "I don't know. But my father has noticed. He's accelerating the trials." He was right. The 5th trial began that morning without warning. Audrey was summoned to the council chamber where King Alaric and his advisors were gathered around a large table covered in documents and maps. "The 5th trial, Wisdom," the king announced. "Our kingdom faces a crisis. 3 rival covens are threatening war. each claiming rights to territory that borders ours. As future consort to the prince, you must propose a solution that prevents bloodshed while protecting our interests." He gestured to the maps. Audrey stepped forward and studied them. The situation was complex. Territorial disputes that had been festering for decades, old grudges and blood feuds complicating every possible solution. This wasn't just a test of intelligence. This was a test of whether she could think politically, whether she could navigate vampire culture and customs despite being human. She spent hours studying the documents, asking questions, piecing together the history. The advisors watched her skeptically, clearly expecting her to fail. But Audrey had spent years observing people, reading situations, surviving by understanding the motives and desires of those around her. And now, with her enhanced perception from the bonding, she could see patterns others missed. Finally, she spoke. "The three covens aren't really fighting over territory," she said. "They're fighting over resources, specifically access to human cities for feeding. The territories they claim all border major population centers." She pointed to the map. "So instead of dividing land, we should establish a rotating schedule for feeding rights. Each coven gets exclusive access to one human city for a set period, then they rotate. That way, no coven is permanently disadvantaged, and the humans aren't overhunted." "And what incentive do the covens have to honor this agreement?" one advisor sneered. "We enforce it," Audrey replied. "This kingdom becomes the arbiter. We monitor compliance and punish anyone who breaks the rotation. It gives us power over all three covens because they'll be dependent on our enforcement." She looked directly at King Alaric. "They came to you because they wanted you to choose between them. Instead, you choose yourself. You make them all need you." The room fell silent. Alaric studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "That's actually brilliant." He looked at his advisors. "Implement it immediately." "Your Majesty, we can't take strategic advice from a human." "She's not just human anymore. And her solution is better than anything you fools have proposed in 3 decades of negotiation." He turned back to Audrey. "You pass. 5 trials down, 2 to go." The 6th trial came the next evening. Audrey was brought to the dungeons, deep beneath the castle where sunlight never reached. In a cell sat a vampire, chained with silver that burned his flesh. He was emaciated, clearly starved for months. "This is Lord Varen," King Alaric said. "He plotted to assassinate your bonded mate 6 months ago. He nearly succeeded. Only Maverick's reflexes saved him." The king handed Audrey a silver dagger. "The 6th trial, mercy. You hold his life in your hands. Kill him, and you show you're willing to be ruthless when necessary. Spare him, and you show weakness. Choose." Audrey looked at the vampire in the cell. He stared back at her with eyes full of hatred and hunger. She thought about the trial carefully. King Alaric said kill to show ruthlessness, or spare to show weakness. But those weren't the only options. "Tell me," she said to Lord Varen, "why did you try to kill the prince?" The vampire laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Because he's weak. Because he's in love with a human. Because he's making our kingdom soft." "And you thought killing him would make you king?" "I thought it would wake everyone up to reality." Audrey turned to King Alaric. "You want me to show mercy or ruthlessness. But I think there's a third option. She handed the dagger back to the king. Transform him into a servant. Use vampire magic to bind his will. Make him serve Maverick for the rest of his immortal life. Every day, he'll have to protect and obey the man he tried to kill. That's a mercy because he lives. But it's also the cruelest punishment imaginable. A slow smile spread across the king's face. Vicious, poetic, perfect. He looked at his guards. Do as she says. As the guards dragged the screaming Lord Varen away, Alaric turned to Audrey with something that might have been pride in his eyes. 6 trials complete. You've surprised me at every turn. His expression hardened. Which is why the 7th trial will be the hardest one you've faced. Be ready tomorrow night, and understand, this final trial will determine not just whether you can stand beside my son, but what kind of queen you'll become. That night, Audrey couldn't sleep. She paced the guest chambers while Maverick watched her with worried eyes. Whatever he throws at you tomorrow, we'll face it together, he said. We won't, though, Audrey replied. The trials have all been mine to face alone. This last one will be too. I hate this. I hate watching you suffer, feeling your pain through our bond and not being able to help. She crossed to him and took his hands. You have helped. Every moment I've felt your strength supporting me, your belief in me. That's what's kept me going. I do believe in you, more than you know. He pulled her close. Tomorrow, when you pass this final trial, my father will have no choice but to acknowledge you. We'll stand before the court as equals. We'll build the life we dreamed of. And if I fail? You won't. You can't. Because if you fail, I lose you. And that's not acceptable. The 7th trial was held in the grand courtyard at midnight. Every vampire in the kingdom had been summoned to witness it. Thousands of them filled the space, standing on balconies and walls, watching with hungry eyes. King Alaric stood on a raised platform with Maverick at his side. Audrey stood alone in the center of the courtyard, feeling the weight of all those stares. The 7th trial is unique for every person who faces it. The king's voice boomed across the courtyard. I have watched Audrey for these past days. I have seen her strength, her cleverness, her control, and I have found her weakness. Audrey's breath caught. What weakness? What had she revealed? Her weakness is hope. She still believes in the goodness of people. She still thinks happy endings are possible. He smiled, cruel and ancient. So for the final trial, I will break that hope. I will show her the truth of what she's bound herself to. He gestured, and guards appeared, dragging a figure between them. At first, Audrey couldn't see who it was through the crowd. Then they came into the torchlight, and her heart stopped. It was Isla, the young vampire who had been kind to her, who had helped her prepare for the blood binding. This vampire has been providing information to human rebels, King Alaric announced. She has betrayed her kind for the sake of helping humans escape our feeding territories. She is a traitor to the crown. No! Isla cried out. I just helped a few families escape. Children who were going to be turned into blood servants. Silence! The king turned to Audrey. Your final trial is this. Execute her. Use your phoenix flames to burn her alive in front of this entire court. Prove that your loyalty to your new life, to your bonded mate, to this kingdom, is stronger than your human compassion. Audrey felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This was cruel beyond measure. Isla had been one of the few vampires to show her kindness, but more than that, Isla had helped human children. Isla was good, or as close to good as a vampire could be. Father, this is too much! Maverick started forward, but guards blocked his path.
Stay where you are. This is her trial, not yours.
Audrey looked at Isla, then at the king, then at Maverick. Through their bond, she felt his anguish, his desperate wish that he could stop this. But he couldn't. This was her choice to make. She summoned her phoenix flames. They rose around her, crimson and silver and deadly. The crowd murmured in anticipation. Everyone expected her to either kill Isla and break her own heart, or refuse and fail the trial. But Audrey had learned something over these 7 trials. She'd learned that sometimes the rules themselves were wrong. Sometimes the only way to win was to change the game entirely. She turned to face King Alaric, her flames burning brighter than they ever had before. "No," she said simply. "I won't do it."
Then you fail. You and Maverick will be exiled.
"I'm not finished," Audrey interrupted, her voice carrying across the silent courtyard. "I won't kill Isla, but I also won't accept exile." She let her flames expand, filling the courtyard with heat and light. "Because I've realized something over these trials. You've been testing me to see if I'm worthy of being consort to a prince. But I don't want to be a consort. I don't want to stand behind anyone or bend to anyone's will." She raised her hands and the flames rose higher, forming shapes in the air. A crown, a throne, a new kingdom being born from fire. "I want to be a queen. Not your queen, answerable to your whims. A queen in my own right, with my own power, my own kingdom." She looked directly at Maverick. "And I want Maverick to rule beside me as my equal, not above me or below me. Together, we'll build something new. A kingdom where vampires and humans and phoenix-blessed can all exist. Where children aren't turned into blood servants. Where power isn't just about who can be the most cruel." The courtyard erupted into chaos. Vampires were shouting, some in outrage, others in shock. But Audrey kept her eyes on King Alaric, watching his face cycle through emotions: fury, disbelief, and finally, grudging respect.
You dare to challenge me.
But his laugh was genuine, not threatening.
You dare to stand in my court and declare yourself my equal.
"No," Audrey said, "not your equal. You're better. Because I would never torture someone for 7 days just to prove a point. I would never force someone to kill their friends to prove loyalty. I would never rule through fear alone." She let her flames die down slightly. "You wanted to break my hope, but you can't. Because hope isn't a weakness. It's the strongest thing in the world. It's what kept me alive as an orphan. It's what made me survive your trials. And it's what will make me a better ruler than you ever were." Silence fell over the courtyard. King Alaric stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, incredibly, he began to laugh. Real laughter, not cruel, but genuinely amused.
"You're absolutely insane," he said. "I wanted to break you, and instead, you're trying to overthrow me."
He looked at Maverick. "And you?
Will you stand with this mad human against your own father?"
Maverick didn't hesitate. "I will. I'll stand with her against anyone." The king studied them both for a long moment. Then, he descended from his platform and walked across the courtyard until he stood directly in front of Audrey. Up close, she could see the ancient power in his eyes, the weight of centuries.
I should execute you both for this insolence, he said quietly. But I won't. Because you're right. I have ruled through fear for too long. And maybe it's time for something new. He raised his voice so the entire court could hear. Audrey has passed all 7 trials. She has proven her strength, her endurance, her loyalty, her control, her wisdom, her mercy, and her courage. She is worthy to stand as an equal to any vampire in this kingdom. He removed his own crown, an ancient circlet of silver and obsidian, and placed it on Audrey's head. I hereby abdicate the throne. Let Maverick and Audrey rule together as king and queen of a new kingdom, one that will forge a path forward for all our people. He stepped back. But know this: if you fail, if your kingdom falls apart, if your pretty ideals crumble in the face of reality, I will take the throne back and rule with more cruelty than ever before. Audrey felt the weight of the crown on her head, felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Through her bond with Maverick, she felt his love, his pride, and his absolute faith in her. I'll stand beside you, Maverick said, taking her hand. Through everything. We'll build this kingdom together. The court erupted into cheers, not all of them, but enough. Enough vampires who were tired of the old ways, who saw opportunity in change, who were willing to follow this strange new queen with fire in her veins and hope in her heart. As the celebration began, as vampires came forward to pledge their loyalty, Audrey looked over at Isla, still bound by guards. She gestured, and the guards released her. You're free, Audrey said, and you're pardoned. In fact, I'm going to need advisors who actually care about protecting innocence. Are you interested? Isla stared at her in shock, then dropped to one knee. I would be honored, Your Majesty. Over the following weeks, Audrey and Maverick began the monumental task of reshaping the vampire kingdom. They established new laws protecting humans in feeding territories, created agreements with human settlements for voluntary donors, set up schools where vampire and human children could learn together. It was hard work, met with resistance from old guard vampires who hated change. But Audrey had her phoenix flames, and Maverick had his centuries of experience. And together, they had their bond, stronger than ever, allowing them to work in perfect synchronization, anticipating each other's needs and supporting each other's decisions. King Alaric watched from the sidelines, officially retired but still offering occasional advice. Audrey suspected he wasn't quite as retired as he claimed, but as long as he didn't actively sabotage them, she was content to let him observe. One evening, 6 months after the trials, Audrey stood on the castle balcony watching the sunset. Maverick came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Happy? He asked. Exhausted, she admitted. Terrified, constantly worried we're making the wrong decisions. She leaned back against him. But yes, happy. You know, when I first saw you in the kitchens, I thought you were beautiful. When I got to know you, I thought you were extraordinary. He kissed her temple. But watching you build a kingdom, watching you turn my father's cruelty into an opportunity for real change, now I know. You're magnificent.
You're just saying that because I can set you on fire if you annoy me.
That too. They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. Somewhere in the castle, vampire and human servants worked side by side preparing the evening meal. In the courtyard below, hybrid children, born of the new unions between vampires and Phoenix Blessed, played with flames that wouldn't burn them and moved with supernatural speed. Audrey thought about the girl she'd been just months ago. Orphaned, overlooked, expecting nothing from life except more of the same hardship she'd always known. That girl could never have imagined this, could never have dreamed she would become a queen, would absorb holy flames and turn them into a weapon, would stand up to an ancient vampire king and win. But she had. Because when King Alaric had tried to burn her, she hadn't just absorbed the fire, she had become it. And now, with Maverick at her side and the phoenix flame burning eternal in her heart, she would forge a new world, one where rejected, underestimated, overlooked women could discover their own power and reshape the world around them. One where happy endings weren't just possible. They were inevitable. Did you like the story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, tell us which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Shout out from our friends in Texas, England, New York, Canada, and more. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!